SFJ 4x4 Studios presents
in my oversized four-wheel drive Jeep.
a Jeep podcast starring industry experts.
Pure monosity. What? Say that again.
With mad scientist Scott Brown,
Use my drill press as a sort of lathe.
our host Neil Simpson,
If one light goes out, they all go out.
filled with shenanigans.
We are really professional with Jeeps.
This is I Speak Jeep.
Good morning, afternoon, evening, wherever, however you are joining us. This is the I Speak Jeep podcast presented by SFJ4x4.com. I'm jiving right
You're
now.
back in studio.
I'm back in the studio, not remote, though I am already noodling on what my next remote shoot's going to be. I'm looking forward to it.
I'm sure.
My name is Neil with Simpson Family Jeeps, joined in Grandma's couch studio,
By the maddest mad scientist.
Doc Brown,
And Jeff Shermani.
the Italian Stallion.
And our comments are on fire this morning. Obviously, Nate is adamant about trying to get that first, and
Killing it.
he tried to get first and third again, but he missed the third. But he got first one, good morning, then Bill, good morning, Joe O'Brien, good morning, and then Nate comes back as Mudhorn, good morning. Jaga Jeepers, good morning. Family is away off-road, says good morning. And Daddy Jeep, sup?
Stop. Listen, look at that. Thank you, all of you, so much for joining us, logging in, and being, a valuable part of our Jeep family in this podcast. And if you are listening to us in your ear holes elsewhere in the world at a slightly later date, first and foremost, we appreciate you. We thank you. And whether you're driving truck across the country or working on the assembly line
Sitting
or
in the courtroom.
sitting in the courtroom,
At your scheduled meeting.
yes, or at your scheduled meeting, we value the fact that you're prioritizing us as part of your infotainment. But understand that you too can join us live on the Book of Faces or the YouTubes, darn near every morning at 10:19 a.m. Every Monday morning at 10:19 a.m. Yeah,
He's
not
ambitious.
every morning.
Oh, wow. Nate is also the family is away off-road, so he's got it on there 3 different times.
Killing it.
And then we got Billy Joe Wilmoth Lyman saying good morning.
Good morning.
I think
Outstanding.
that's Bill McWilliams, just so we're on the same page.
Okay. That's
Happy
fine.
for you, Jeff.
Everybody's using their burner accounts.
They are.
Everybody's got their burner
No,
accounts out today.
no, because there was a. I'll tell you about off air why I think that.
Okay.
Okay.
Good story, Jeff.
Yeah, no, I realize I don't want to give away too much information. About
Okay.
people.
Okay. Well, listen to you creeping on people. So, anywho, we are back. It is happy spring forward. It's probably the least.
Is it happy?
Yeah, I was gonna say it's probably the least desirable day of the year for most people.
I prefer this time, but I don't like that we have to lose an hour to do it.
Sure.
They could
Fair.
just leave it like this. It'd be great.
Yes.
I know it's a political hot topic every year.
Every year. It's
And-
fascinating.
My understanding is yet again there's not going to be any change because it's such a 50-50 issue. So many people prefer this time, and then the rest prefer the other time. So
There's no positives of the other time.
It's fascinating.
if
It
you're,
is
if you're
absolutely
a farmer,
fascinating.
there is.
And you know what? I fell down the rabbit hole years ago, and it's kind of not even that anymore.
He said not Bill, but close. I don't know what that means.
I kind of fell down the rabbit hole, and there's a whole geopolitical economic conversation to how we consume electricity and energy costs and a whole bunch of travel expenditures and interesting things, honestly. Because I used to say, this was my line, I would vote for any politician who would abolish the daylight savings time,
Switching of the times.
switching of the times. And then I kind of fell down the rabbit hole, and I found some supporting documentation. I thought, well, you know what? I can tolerate this. There was some interesting information regarding why we do it still.
No, who in my house can't tolerate it?
Your kids.
My cats.
Oh, they weren't ready.
No. Lots of meowing.
What was one of the biggest reasons you found why you would tolerate it?
So,
Because it had a good reason, so that's all he needed.
yeah, there were actually
I wanna
good
know
reasons.
what the good reasons are.
Yeah, so it's funny. It was one of those things that that was a couple years ago, and I remember again. It was like I said prior to that. I was like, I'll do anything to get rid of this, and I thought it was the farmer conversation, and it's not.
Then it was about electric and energy savings. That was the other hot
Right.
topic as to why.
So I'm not prepared to explain at the moment, but it actually has to do with the economic. So there's a baseball equation that was what threw me over the edge.
So we're playing
And
Moneyball now.
Yeah, right. and for the life of me, I don't remember exactly what that was, but I read this synopsis, and it was about a baseball game, and it was about how the game, if we started the game without springing forward, that the manner in which the game would end has so many negative implications that it was spelled out as clear as day to me. And it was both a analogy, but then it was also kind of literal. And I wasn't prepared to tell you about this, so I can't expand upon it.
What?
But that was what threw me over the edge. I was like, holy cow, this is legit. And it's one of the arguments about how much energy expenditure we would exert on our current
So it's back to the
infrastructure.
energy.
And it was actually how much people spend money in our economic situation,
Yeah.
which is not at all what we should be talking about right now. But it was very valid, and I was like, okay, I'm a supporter. Back, I have wavered. I was presented with information, and I am here for it at this time.
I am thankful for all the things in my house that automatically switch.
I actually hate how many things that still don't automatically switch, because then half your clocks say one time and the other half say the
Oh.
other, and you have to go through and
My son was so
Either-
confused.
correct. Yep.
What time is it, Dad?
Yeah. So we're is semi happy spring forward, depending on where you're at in the conversation. But Jeffrey had a very apt and fun title for today's
Spring ahead.
Spring Ahead, because last week we were supposed to be doing Suspension Chronicles.
Yes.
And instead, you just heard of my many follies
Yeah.
of the
The Curious Misadventures of Neil.
yes.
So real quick in the comments, John Miller said hello, and Roy said good morning, everyone.
Good morning. Good morning. So we are going to be unpacking suspension, which I love.
Mm-hmm.
Which I love. And so in the conversation, Scott posed to us and said, how, should we contextualize? Where should we start?
Yes.
I
To
just
which-
feel like you missed a big opportunity. Instead of saying unpacking, you should have said unloading suspension.
He's on fire today.
Yeah, he's had enough coffee. I think his spring forward is not
He's leafing through the repertoire of suspension.
of suspension puns leafing through. Oh my God, guys are the worst. It's terrible. So terrible puns. They're not even good puns. They're terrible.
Did you expect any less?
No.
No, he wants to get more with his lift.
He's just jealous he didn't
No.
think of it.
A little. Touche. So to which Jeffrey appropriately says, I don't know, maybe we shouldn't make this into 2 episodes, basically. And he was like, he's just kind of like lobs this into the air. Like, I don't know if you two could shut up long enough and not like go
Well,
all the way back to the beginning.
I said it looking dead at Scott while you were playing on your phone, and Scott's like, I think he meant that towards you. I'm like, no, I meant it towards both of you.
Yeah.
Let's be clear.
Yeah.
He's
Scott and I
such a
want to go
hater.
back to the rock ages and when man first invented the wheel with no suspension.
When he was annealing the metal with his rock.
Yes.
Yes.
That's where Scott and I would like to start in the conversation, but most people eyes glaze over in the process
Yes.
and kind of don't care.
Eric says good morning as well.
Good morning. Yeah, I think that since we are supposed to be a off-road inspired podcast,
Mm-hmm.
we should focus on that I think torsion axles are not necessary for us to unload today.
I think we focus specifically on Jeep suspension throughout the years.
He was trying to do a pun. Did you notice that?
I wasn't. I was just, you know what? It was fun when you guys were doing it, and it's lame when I do it. That's fine. Whatever.
So, as always, I think we should start where Jeep started, and they had leaf springs.
How many leaf springs?
All of them.
That's the right answer, folks.
So many.
If you've
leaf
ever
springs.
looked at an old military pack
because
of the 40s,
if 5 will do it, 16 will do it better.
Well, let's clarify. When you say 5 leaf springs, we're talking in a pack under one
Yes.
side of the axle.
yeah. So, let's just kind of like do a big umbrella. So in general, we have leaf suspension.
Mm-hmm.
We now the most common on the road is going to be a coil spring suspension at 4 corners.
Yep.
Right. And that is with what most people will call a solid axle suspension with many of our Wranglers.
Yes.
Yeah, because you can get into the independent suspension.
We do
as
have
well.
independent front and rear suspension, which does not exactly have the same coil spring function, while we have struts which utilize coil springs.
Yeah.
In our IFS, independent front suspension, and IRS, independent rear suspension. We really see that mostly in our unibody constructed vehicles. Now, that's a generality, not an absolute, because for many years, Jeep offered a solid axle rear with an IFS front. And there's a whole bunch of conversations regarding that kind of stuff. That's your Liberties, your Grand Cherokees.
James is in the comment trying to support you. He says to pun or not to pun.
You know, I'm not quick enough to pun, but the guys are on fire as far as they're concerned. So we have the conversation about IFS, IRS, which is always one that's lobbed around. It's been threatened that our Wranglers were going to go IFS, IRS for 20 years now, as far as I'm concerned. Mm-hmm. I remember when they teased us under the TJ platform as they were looking at what the JK would look like.
Yep.
And everybody lost their ever-loving mind.
Well, we need that argument between the Toyota and Bronco people and the Jeep people, where we're old and have straight axles, and they've got this overly complicated, front independent suspension.
100%.
Linda says, "Long live the KJ."
Well, and Linda is bringing exactly one of those vehicles to conversation regarding the independent front suspension and a solid axle rear. We can then get into 3 links and 4 links and all that kind of stuff, which, I stinking love, honestly. I don't know that we're going to totally do that yet, but
yeah.
And then there is the combination,
Yeah,
which
we're not doing 2 episodes on this. This is 1 episode.
This is 2 episodes, folks. Just you're here, just so you're all aware. So
I'm going to bring us back to where we're trying to get beginning, because he's pontificating right now on many types of suspension.
I was trying to lay the
He's bouncing
groundwork
around, if you will.
Our first.
Oh my gosh! just so if you didn't catch that, Jeffrey said he's bouncing around, if you will. What Jeffrey brings to the table is just a remarkable,
uniqueness.
very unique situation.
Yes.
Do
So,
you remember when Jeff worked on the service floor?
Yeah, it was not a good option.
he was all in, though.
He was all in. He's the best.
So anyway, we go to our
You go there.
to our early military Jeeps, and then our CJ2As and 3As and all the A's and B's.
Yes.
They had leaf springs on all 4 corners and
Solid axles.
Solid axles. Something kind of unique that maybe most don't know is they have a kind of a trunnion shackle, which means that it actually has threads in it, unthreads and rethreads as the suspension moves, which is great if you're an old farmer and you got a grease gun that you grease your springs every single day before you go to work.
And the GIs had the mechanics who were enlisted in the military at that time.
They had all the fittings.
They had all the fittings. Their job was literally to maintenance.
Yes.
And
put 2 tubes of grease in that Jeep today. Thank you.
And that was okay because that was what their daily job was.
Yes.
And I think what an amazing suspension design, because when we talk about simple physics, right? The inclined plane or that screw feature.
Yep.
That's literally what it was working on, was this idea that threading and unthreading was creating this robust connection.
Yes.
Go ahead.
So anyways, then at some point they realized that we're lazy as a people.
Yep.
So we went to rubber bushings at both ends.
Well, I think there was an argument of ride quality, NVH, noise, vibration, harshness. What do you think?
Man,
Do you think
it's a Jeep?
Yeah, I
Yes.
think that because the trunnion was metal on metal. Was there even bronze or brass in that?
No,
If I recall.
just grease.
Yeah, it was
all
just
the
grease. It was just metal and metal and
I
all
mean,
the
you had
grease.
sort of a rubber washer that sort of kept the grease in the threads.
Right.
Bill told you to quit dampening my puns. That was a
Quit
good one.
dampening my.
So
Yep.
speaking of dampening, something else many people may not know is the earliest Jeeps, they didn't have nuts or anything like that holding on the shock. It just had a cotter pin
Yes.
because, that's all you needed.
You need quick change.
Yes.
You needed a quick change.
That never got serviced or ever changed in the life of the Jeep.
The shock?
Yeah.
Yeah, that's true because they just flat out worked. I could really unpack shock technology. I would like to. I could do a whole episode just on shocks.
You probably could. Anyways.
Really like shock valving.
So now we're into the middle 50s, 60s, where we're decided we're gonna start caring about not having to grease things every 5 minutes. So we have rubber bushings on both ends. We have just a plain piece of steel with 2 holes in it for a shackle.
Mm-hmm.
For 2 seconds in 1955, your CJ5 had shackles in the rear, and then in 56, they were like, "Nah, we'll just put them in the front," and they just ran with that forever.
When you say that, you mean in the front leaf spring.
Correct.
You were talking about a shackle reversal, so let's just get this out of the way. Leafs are for the pores. If you're not familiar with that phrase, that was the around the TJ, the
and the reason that is
thrown at the YJ guy specifically.
because not only does your leaf spring your Jeep, it also locates your axle. It allows it to travel and move. So it does a lot of jobs in one.
Well, it
kind of
wasn't
thing.
very complicated. You could actually leaf a vehicle pretty easily.
And
Yes.
since you specifically brought up the YJs, Daddy Jeep was in the comments saying, "Come on, Bill, I'm shocked you would do that." The puns are real today.
We're so punny. So the Leafs are incredibly versatile and easy to work with.
Yes.
In this time frame, and so what you're talking about is what a lot of off-roaders sought to do later on in life, myself included, was a shackle reversal, is what we
Yes.
called shackle reversal. Basically, it takes the shackle hanging position, and it fixes the leaf spring at the front and puts the shackle hangers inboard to the back of the front leaf
Which,
spring.
Some militaries did have that with the M38A1 and 55. When the CJ5 came out, they just kind of copied that. And
But
then
why would you do that?
Thank you. I'm so glad you asked, Jeffrey. I was like,
I was
I want
getting there.
to do it. I want to do it. Oh,
I was getting there.
fine. Well, so here's the thing. Here's the secret,
wait, before
folks.
you get into that, Nate is coiling over with excitement on this topic.
Oh my goodness.
So
Well, here's the thing.
what Neil
Here's
was
the
about to
piece.
say
Here's the
was-
piece, right? No, because Scott hates shackle reversals because he was at an off-roading event where he saw the negative implications of shackle reversal, and I know he's going to bring it up.
all the time.
But I love a shackle reversal. But there's a trade-off, just like anything.
Yes.
And I know that if Scott gets to say it first, He's going to tell you why it's bad. And
Neil's going to talk about how the energy transfer is better and how it'll climb over rocks more efficiently.
Do you hear the disdain in his voice?
If he's gonna tell your version of it, now you have to tell his version.
And how
why he's gonna hate on
it actually rides nicer.
It does ride nicer. The natural path of as a vehicle travels down the road, and as you encounter a bump, a pothole, and the energy travels up through the tire, as the axle articulates and swings, that energy gets to go through the shackle bushing, and the arc of the travel, the natural arc of the leaf spring elongates, which absorbs the energy better because you're cresting the speed bump,
The obstacle.
and then the arc naturally happens versus you hit the bump and then, so you're already arcing when you hit the speed bump, whereas if the shackle's in the front, first you hit the speed bump or the obstacle with a kind of a abrasive smack, and then it forces it to arc.
It's not a smooth transition.
It's not the smooth transition of the suspension.
Which is why I believe square body Chevys were reversed from the get-go.
From forever, right?
And that kind of stuff. But
here we go.
Well,
So-
now that we're ready for Scott's, Nate says, "Quit wasting time and strut to the point."
So, if you can have a very flat suspension with minimal amount of travel, it's great. Because where the problem lies is then if your front drive shaft is not long enough for the amount of travel that you can get with the shackle reversal, because as the suspension unloads, the axle moves forward
in a shackle reversal.
And your transfer case does not. So the slip in that drive shaft needs to be very well endowed to be able to take care of that.
It's that well endowed. And he's talking about the drive shaft.
I did that.
Oh,
So anyway,
because if you think, right, and so this is why, and exactly what Scott is bringing up, one of the primary engineering pieces to say why we put the shackles in the forwardmost position and the rearwardmost position is specifically in off-road vehicles for a high-centered experience. And I'm not talking about it immediately at speed, but at the kind of the creepy crawly full articulation, because what naturally happens is the wheelbase shortens. So as the vehicle is high centered, so let's pretend we're picking up the vehicle right in the center of it, the suspension actually swings inward. So the front swings towards the back and the back swings towards the front, and that wheelbase gets shorter.
which helps the drive shafts.
Which benefits the drive shaft so long as they're appropriate to the vehicle.
Yes.
And so you can have a lift, you can have taller springs, and the ramifications to the rest of the drive line is less effective. If it's more affected, it's more predictable.
Yeah.
Whereas exactly what Scott
With
is
the shackle
saying.
reversal, now the front is actually swinging away, which again, there are some positives to that. But then if you just go and use a drive shaft that you've experienced will work on 99% of the other vehicles, and you put it in that situation, you just pull the slip apart, and suddenly you don't have front drive.
Yep.
And the back part of the drive shafts now.
Scott watched it happen
beating
one
the
time at this
crap.
big off-road event, and this buggy truggy thing was half perched, and it would have done this precarious, wild, freaking climb, and it was wob wob wob, and the tire started to spin, and then kapow, because the drive shaft exited the chat.
The other thing that can happen is the front axle can actually roll away from the vehicle as it's climbing a ledge, which is exactly what happened to this CJ7 buggy. Is the front axle rolled forward because it wrapped the springs and pulled the drive shaft apart, and now the Jeep was 10 feet higher in the nose than the back, and they're trying to put the drive shaft back together on the obstacle.
Yeah,
Which I'm here for. But it was interesting for a while.
to say the least. say the least.
And you're hoping your brake lines have enough distance for that and
Now,
all kinds of stuff.
Here's the thing, because our teeth were cut under the leaf spring era,
Yes.
right? There were people who could set up
Oh yeah.
a amazing leaf spring suspension.
It's all about having all the right pieces.
But
to
you
work
have to have all the right pieces. But
cohesive.
it's no different than our builds now,
Correct.
right? There's plenty of shops and businesses and individuals who put vehicles together and they're just missing a few of the ingredients. And
All
so
the time.
therefore it has unintended consequences.
Yeah,
Yep.
poor
And-
ride quality that gives death wobble.
100%.
There's all these different variables, and it's usually just one
we,
minor
we
thing.
constantly hear, oh, I got my new to me Jeep lifted and now I've got death wobble. Well, I got to be
Yeah.
honest, it was not the lift, right? It
Right.
was even the poorest quality of lifts. The lift did not give you death wobble, you know?
Unless it's that one. But anyway.
Fair.
Yeah.
Even then, that just gives you bump steer, in my opinion.
So then we get into the 80s and we're into the YJs. So we're still leaf sprung, but they wanted to ride nicer. So they made a longer shackle. Hold on. And that was allowed the spring to move around easier. The problem with a long shackle is now you have what's called shackle lean, which means that you steer the Jeep and the axles move and then the shackles lean and then the frame kind of catches up and then you go along for the ride, which is why
It's true.
the Wagoneers of that era and the YJs had track bars. They were trying to make the axle not take off underneath the middle of the Jeep. And that worked fine when we were stock suspension, flat leaf springs, where it again only moving probably 3 inches, wouldn't you say,
Mhm.
of travel. And then we go along and we lift them up to put big tires on them and screw that all up. And then suddenly now your track bar wants to move in an arc and your leaf springs want to move straight up and down. And things don't jive. Things don't work. So the most common thing I remember when I first got into Jeeps is if you had a YJ, you're under there with a hacksaw or a sawzall or any cutting implement, and you're cutting the bracket off the axle because the bolts were seized.
The bolts were seized, man. Do you know how many of those? I just cut the track bar. I wasn't even
Yeah.
cutting the bracket off.
Oh, yeah.
I was literally just hacking the bar right at the head of it. I
Yes.
was just leaving that other stuff alone. I
Yes.
didn't care. I was just taking the hack bar because that was like an 1.125" diameter
Yes.
tube, and I could cut through that pretty darn easy with a hacksaw.
Yeah. And then
Absolutely.
suddenly the Jeeps felt like it was a little bit more easy going down the road and you had more flex.
Yep.
And, you know, it was a Jeep. So it was fine that you had to steer and then wait 5 minutes
a
for the
Jeep
rest
thing.
of the Jeep to catch up.
Yes.
But that's one of the reasons why longer shackles can cause those kind of issues. The other thing a longer shackle will do, we don't see it as much with Jeeps, but we did see it with the 70s with muscle cars. The longer the shackle, the more force or effort the spring has to put out. So it will break down a spring quicker with a longer shackle than a shorter shackle. So off-road, that's actually a good thing because that makes the spring work, helps you get over the obstacle, helps you kind of get the best you can of the technology, but does make that lifespan of the spring a little shorter.
Well, before you interrupt,
I keep raising my hand.
no,
I'm trying not to interrupt.
I know, but so Scott tried to throw delicately a lift kit manufacturer under the bus without saying who they were, and you continued with that. Well, now the comments are asking, which is the one?
Oh, it's in my YouTube video. So it's a Rough Country 3.5-inch JK lift kit.
Yeah.
It doesn't belong in the Jeep industry. No ifs, ands, or buts. I'd love to have a conversation with Rough Country Corporate about it.
Yep.
But arguably, drop pitman arms don't belong on JKs until you're 6-8 inches in the air. And even then, there's a whole lot of other things that change in the process. You should be flipping steering, and a whole other conversation. But
The long and short of it is they have a drop pitman arm and they don't drop the track bar at the frame. They raise the track bar at the axle. So you actually make the angles worse.
right, You actually get an opposing arc of travel when you're for that road obstacle, whether it be speed bump, pothole, whatever, and you inherently create bump steer. There's your 10-second.
Yeah. So if you
explanation.
hear a Jeep buddy saying, "Hey, I need a puller for my JK Pittman arm," stop him and go,
Stop them.
"Why? Why
Yep.
are you doing this?
Yep.
Maybe you shouldn't do this."
And that was a moment in our industry because we did put drops on XJs and YJs and
Yes.
TJs, and there was value or merit in doing that, but the whole technology changed. The reason they sell that kit, hands down, is on a CAD drawing, it's perfect. Your angles are beautiful. Your steering in that moment is correlative to each other. If you were to only ever drive down the smoothest, flattest highway type road, the suspension will work sufficiently for the average consumer.
Yep.
And they sell the kit for, they used to sell it for $450. I think it's like $450 to $650. So you go into Jim Bob's garage and you want your Jeep lift because you don't know anything about it, or your local outfitter, upfitter. It was an incredibly popular kit that the average bear put on their JK because they didn't know better. And then they just absolutely hated the ride quality. They felt like it was unsafe. It was loose, and it just caused lots of problems, not just mechanically, but socially for our industry as well.
Now, Nate did comment and say that he actually has the 3.5 RC lift on his Gladiator. No complaints on that. He just isn't familiar with the JK version.
Correct. And it's a very specific kit.
Yes.
And we use Rough Country. I have no qualms about them as a brand. You're not going to hear me throw them under the bus. You are going to hear me address a specific product that they make.
Yeah.
So I was raising my hand trying to not interrupt you, based on the fact that we laid the groundwork to say that the military Jeeps had 11 Leafs in their pack.
Yep.
How wide were they?
Oh, that's a good point. I was trying to glaze over some stuff because Jeff was on no 2 episodes.
I know.
Well,
So
I think I've lost that one at this point.
But just so everybody's aware, next week is Happy St. Patty's Day, that Monday. So like, may the luck of the Leafs be with you.
oh boy,
Right? No.
no,
That was a good try.
it was a good try.
I'll give you that. You're trying to play in the same game as
I
everyone
hate
else.
you all. Whatever. Whatever. I'm over it.
Good morning, Scott.
Nope. Garbage. Whatever. So how wide were they in the
I love
middle?
the
I'm trying to
accent, though.
remember.
Did you like it? See, I busted out
Was
an
it
accent
inch
for
and
you.
a half or inch and 3/4?
Yeah, so I think it's inch and a half. I actually think it's a hair shyer than inch and a half, but it's a peculiar, so we call it inch and a half as
So
a
I
generic.
always get confused, but basically the earliest Jeeps, the Leafs, were the same width front and back, but they
Correct.
weren't wide at all. I think it was inch and a half. And then at some point they're like, hey, we should make it just a little bit wider in the back. And I think they went like inch and a half and 2. And then it was, hey, 2s for everybody.
Mhm.
And then it was, hey, the front should be 2, but the back should be 2.5. And then YJs happen, and they're like 2.5 for everybody.
You get 2.5 and you get 2.5. And the piece here, folks, is our understanding of spring steel construction.
Yes. Which
there's
is
a-
why if you look under your YJ that's stock, which maybe you have one of the last ones in the world, you'll have like, I don't know, 4 leaves.
4. It'll be 4 to 6, typically speaking, leaves on a YJ. You could have a 5 leaf pack. You could have a 6. You could have a 4. There were rumors of other ones.
Back in the days when you went to order springs, they said, do you have a hard top or not?
Correct.
Do
You would
have
actually
a
get extra
6-cylinder
leaf.
or not?
Daddy Jeep was actually trying to support you. He said, "Leave the puns to us, Neil." And then
Leaf the puns to us, Neil. Perfect.
Scott's loving his package that we put in, and he made a note that it is not Rough Country, and he does have a JK. So.
Yes. Yep.
Yeah.
And it's a similar height, honestly. It was
Yep.
a great quality Rusty's made in the U.S. Product that we put in Scott's. But regardless, the leaf spring technology changes, and we create that width, and it's the whole adage of there's no replacement for displacement. We're now moving the load of that spring, across basically double the width. Not
Yes.
quite, but
Yeah.
pretty darn pretty darn good. And so we reduced the leaves needed to do the same amount of work. The other piece that I just think is worth noting, there is something called a military wrap for the main eyes, which was basically, the idea was that we needed to make the suspension robust in case it broke, that there was a degree of redundancy that would not leave
our GI side on the road broken.
Exactly.
He could get back to the camp.
Correct. That it made it just more robust, and then if there was damage to it, we had some redundancy. And so it was basically two main leaves of sorts wrapped over each other, creating the main eyes.
So something else too.
We do away with that in civilian though.
Yes, most of our Wrangler or open top Jeep leaf sprung style Jeeps. Try not to anger all the CJ and all those other guys. Anyway, most of the time the springs are pretty equilateral from center pin to shackle and to main attachment. So lots of times I remember early days of like, well, which end goes where? Because I can't tell, because the spring is basically the same if you split it down the middle of the eye bolt. When we went into XJs and MJs with leaf sprungs in the front, or in the rear, I'm sorry, they actually aren't.
Correct.
They're shorter in the front and longer in the rear, and that is more for ride, carrying capacity. All those
They have a different size bushing.
Different size bushings, which YJs do have a bigger bushing at the frame,
correct, than
at the shackle as well. But that was all kind of engineered into that kind of stuff.
Right. We learned a few lessons over the years.
Yes.
Because I'm glad you bring that up, but basically in 1984, the world changes.
Yes.
Right. And in the Jeep world,
yes.
But AMC had already been playing in their cars.
Yes.
Specifically, I get all
Eagle wagons.
The Eagle wagons, right, had already laid the groundwork.
Yes.
And if you're unfamiliar with that, so basically we have this love child of what AMC was doing. They were already making the world's ugliest, slowest cars over here,
as they should,
and they acquire Jeep. Right?
Yep.
And they were like, you know what would be even uglier and more problematic?
If we took the car we've been making for, I don't know, umpteen million years and retrofit a four-wheel drive system into the front.
Yes.
And they sold like hotcakes.
They did.
It's almost as iconic as a Wagoneer. If you're making an 80s featured video at this point, it has to have at least a Eagle somewhere in it.
I love them, man.
And wood grain preferred.
Wood grain Eagle. Oh my God. Oh, I'm feeling some type of way already.
So, anyway, which way? So in 84, they break the world and they put coil springs in the front, leafs in the rear, and I'm sure there was someone angry at some point about it.
Well, we hated Cherokees because they were just grocery getters.
Well, and they were, frameless
and shameless.
So at first, I'm sure that was hard for someone to overcome. But any which way, we go with 4 control arms. We go with a track bar. We have coil springs, and we have a really nice ride. Again, we designed it so the control arms are flat because we don't have tons of travel. Sway bar in the front, sway bar in the rear. So it kind of handled decently for what it was. And we ran with that for ever. There was other changes, but we've talked about those in past episodes. So that gets us into 94 with the Grand Cherokee comes out, and they decide to take the same design.
Checking him.
93.
Oh, there it is!
So
excited.
What's really funny about that is Scott Bennett was just asking, does Scott's mind ever stop? Does he ever sleep? The problem is he does sleep, but he dreams about Jeeps and cars. So
yeah,
don't judge me.
I'm gonna take a moment to toot Scott's horn, Scott Brown's horn, because he is such a phenomenal just an individual, just a good human being. But the funny thing is, when most people go home and they unwind for the day, maybe you work on a construction site, or maybe you work on a factory line. You know what I mean? You go home for the day and you're excited about your bowling league in the evening. You're going to turn on maybe a sitcom. You're going to get excited over cooking dinner and like understanding the ingredients and the recipe and all that kind of stuff. You're going to go home and the wall in your kitchen is going to be maybe a beach theme, or maybe it's a palm tree. Maybe it's something other than that's contrary to your daily life. Scott doesn't. He never gets tired of his automotive mind. So his automotive mind is working. It's just simply exposed to the automotive world 24/7, even sleeps, dreams.
I'll
Not
just say,
everybody-
Kitchen,
I've been over to his house and the TV's playing its auto shows.
it's auto shows.
There's eclectic automotive parts all throughout. As
And his wife
decorations.
supports him. Their kitchen is fully done in like old oil cans and old signage
her
and in cars.
backsplash is license plates.
Her backsplash is license plates.
Yeah.
And it's tasteful, right? And it's all tasteful.
It is.
And when Amy wants to work on a
It's
project,
like walking into a museum.
that's cool, honey. You can work on your bureau refinishing project right next to me while I do metalworking in this car job. It's not, you know, he's never shut down from his own passion. And I like to think that we're able to culture that here. Whereas a lot of people get burnt out and they're like, I don't even want to do anything that has to do with my daily job when I go home. We're all kind of like, oh, you know what? This isn't so bad. I kind of want to work on my own rig. I kind of want to do this, you know? That's people always are like, oh, don't make your hobby into your profession. And I'm like, I don't know.
Oops.
Like, oops. Like, I feel pretty good, you know?
If you're passionate enough about it, you'll never work a day in your life.
Amen. All right. So we're back
Anyways, so actually 93,
to, yeah, buddy.
the ZJ happens.
And here's the problem, folks. 93, you could get 4-coil
Uh-huh.
corner suspension.
Yep.
You could get a high output 4.0.
Mm-hmm.
What am I missing? What is my love? It's the 1 year of the manual offered
Yes.
in the Grand Cherokee.
You get an AX15.
You get an AX15, external slave AX15. That was the precursor. If there was a granddaddy to the TJ Wrangler,
It's true.
it came out in 1993, and I loved it. And those were unicorns.
Yes, they were. To
All right.
forever be parted out for other people. The manual swap their ZJs.
That's exactly correct. All right, I'm done.
Linda just reiterated the do what you love and you'll never work a day in your life.
Amen.
Yep. So anywho's.
All right, so now the Grand comes out.
So the Grand comes out, has coils all the way around, probably angered more people.
Oh, yeah.
Also spineless, no frame, kind of just built off of what they learned with the Cherokee. Forever ruined all part stores because now if you own a Cherokee, you had to be like, was it a Grand Cherokee or a Cherokee?
Mm-hmm. It's a Laredo.
Yes.
I've got a Laredo, folks.
So that takes us all the way up to 97, where Jeep is like, hey, if it works on the Grand, we might as well do it on the Wrangler now.
Mm-hmm.
And the TJ happens. And we have kind of their own design for the rear. The front is straight up just ripped off of the Cherokee,
100%. Totally interchangeable.
pretty much. The only main difference is where you change your adjustment. If you're not going to go with adjustable control arms on the Cherokee, it was at the frame. At the TJ, it was at the axle.
Folks, if you own a JK, a JL, and a JT, you should be paying attention because realistically, the suspension that's under your vehicle right now is the one that Scott just chronicled in 93 and now again in 97. So what you hear happening is your suspension.
84.
Well, I'm saying front and rear.
Yeah.
But
basically.
technically the same concept, the orientation, you're right, does start in 84, but now when we put it, we just reverse it and throw it in the rear.
Yeah.
Again, 93 and 97. So it's very applicable to our JK, JL, JT crowd.
Yes.
All right, keep on what you're doing.
So, anywho's, that takes us all the way up to,
Can we eliminate track bars
No.
like we did with our YJs?
No.
So it was very confusing for people who had leaf springs.
Well, you can, for a very specific instance, if you want all the flex and you come to SFJ4x4.com and you order an IRO long arm, we can remove your track bar in the rear.
Right. So there's a whole conversation, and we'll just mention them for that purposes. There are triangulated. Now,
Yes.
when we talk about
I just want to clarify real fast. You cannot actually order that from sfj4x4.com. You would have to call us, and we will get that order placed.
that's true.
That's
and,
true.
And there are other brands other
we're
than
gonna ask you
IRO.
questions.
But we're going to ask you a bunch of questions, how you're going to use the Jeep and what would be useful for you. But the Grand Cherokee in a 99, in fact, has a 3-link rear of sorts. I know you didn't want to talk about it. But I have to. I have to mention what they affectionately call the upper Y link.
So in 99, they decided that they knew the JK was coming because they're always about 10 years ahead.
Mm-hmm.
And they're like, hey, we got to test some of this stuff because we're making the Jeep wider and we're making it heavier. So
JK people, listen, this is about you.
So let's just rip the Band-Aid off and let's do it in the Grand. So in 99, we're still... I remember the fear mongering. We're gonna have to have IFS in the front of the Grand.
Always.
And they're like, no. And I think it's honestly because they were testing all the stuff out for the JK.
Agreed.
We're gonna do it straight axle again. Well, the problem is they only half committed, and they took a front axle and they're like, hey, we've had this Dana 30 we've been using since I don't know, 1980
The dawn of age.
and we're just going to make it wider. Which they sort of tried to do 1 year only in a Wagoneer 73 only had a front 30. They learned that was bad and put a 44 in there. For some reason, that person must have read that in the history books, or maybe that was their grandpa, and they're like, "You only need a 30 in the front of your big SUV," and they're like, guys, we had this old idea. Let's just go ahead and do this again. Well, that's fine-ish, but then we did like other things to make it weaker.
You know what? We should do a thing of what is old is new again, because you're talking about axles.
Yeah,
But like we should not talk anymore about axles, but we
Yes.
should do a what's old is new again conversation.
we should.
That's a good one.
That is.
so-
real quick, Jeannie's in the comments saying hi, everyone. So
Good morning.
So the other part that I understand why they did what they did, because they were trying to make the Grand as cushy and Cadillac as possible.
Yes.
But if rubber isolators at top of the springs are good, you know what's better? Rubber on both ends,
Yes. Rubber.
because they're not thinking about the brine and the salt and how things are going to disappear because the rubber holds all the smuts onto it on your weak axle.
I feel like he's got a little bit of a grudge.
Yes.
I
Well,
had a Grand.
He had a 99.
2000.
2000, excuse
And
me.
it was a cushy ride, man. It was a lot of things to like about it. I just wanted the JK swap my axles. Is
Mhm.
really what I wanted to do. Just
Mhm.
never got that far. So then in the rear, we have our traditional lower control arms. We have a pretty traditional coil spring arrangement. But in the top, they decided to do a boomerang with a ball joint in the center. And instead of having our bushings go like they should and go up and down with our bolts through the sides, they decided to put them like a front wheel drive car's control arm and put them the other direction.
So that the bull is actually oriented vertically.
Yeah. And that's great until you want to lift your Jeep.
Mm-hmm.
And yes, the boomerang fills up with salt and rusts out as well, because, why not?
And this is the top link. So instead
Yeah.
of upper control arms, you have this boomerang or this Y, but
Yeah.
ultimately that's the top link that centers the axle. And that's what's valuable, is that lower control arms establish wheelbase,
Mhm.
upper control arms establish caster, right? Or
pinion
pinion
angle.
angle, right? Caster in the front, which is going to be correlative with pinion angle. So caster to pinion angle.
Yep.
And then specifically in the rear is pinion angle, because there's not caster in the rear necessarily when it comes to some of those suspension terms that we use. But when you go to a 4-link or a Y, or an upper link like that, you don't technically have to have a track bar.
Right. It is a
Because-
simpler system,
It's a simpler system because you're utilizing a triangle,
Right.
and as far as to orient that axle.
which is your strongest shape. But the problem with that suspension design. Again, we go along and we want to make it big and put bigger tires on it, which on the Dub J is like, okay, I want to put 31s on it. Well, now I have to lift it to the moon because I did that.
Yep.
Anyway.
Because the wheel openings don't exist.
Yep. Lots of hammering, lots of cutting. Anyway, that upper link at Y wants to be pretty much flat. Well, now we're trying to jack up the suspension and it can't be anymore. So now the bushings that are in the wrong way are upset. The ball joint is upset. So then they made ball joint spacers and they made iron Ys that replaced the whole thing.
Mm-hmm.
All kinds of stuff had to happen to make all that work. And they did a very similar thing on the KJ in the rear, where they then got IFS in the front with an aluminum Daytona 30 because, why not? We just ride that horse.
The
until
Liberty
there's
had
nothing
so
left.
much potential.
It did.
It had so much potential. And I understand that Linda and Joe took the Liberty further than, they might as well have landed on the moon with their
Yes,
Liberty.
pretty much.
That is unfortunately an outlier, not a bell curve of KJ owners.
They tried
but
to
I-
make them cute. And some people were here for it and some weren't.
I desperately wanted a KJ Renegade TRD, or they had a CRD. CRD.
With a stick.
Yeah, it was such a cool Jeep. That
Yeah.
had the capacity to be such a cool Jeep. But anyways, let's move on to our JKJLJT.
I was
folks.
going to say, we're down to about 4 minutes left.
4.
Yeah.
That's not enough time.
That's not enough time.
I
Jeff.
know. And
Jeff.
we haven't even got to the air ride suspensions or anything like that. There's a lot to talk
So
about.
I hear.
That's another episode. I knew it was going to happen.
I tried, Jeff. I did try.
No,
You
he
drug
didn't.
me back.
I was going to say, you talked more of that episode than anybody. Don't tell
Well,
me you tried.
Last week I was very quiet, so I had,
He's oversharing, and he's rationalizing his
I know.
his
I know what he's
decision-making
doing.
at this point. So JK comes out, right?
Yeah.
So JK, once again, we're abused as enthusiasts, and there was this potentiality that we were going to get IFS,
yes,
right?
fear-mongered.
Fear-mongering,
Yes.
misinformation.
But they knew they weren't going to do it. Like
No.
I said, they're 10 years ahead. So they go ahead and they learn from the WJ, and they probably fired that guy that thought
Hopefully.
the 30 was a good idea. And they're like, listen, we can still call it a 30, but we need to learn from,
Yes.
45 years of design. And we made a high pinion 30, beefier in all the internals. We got rid of the god-awful rubber down at the axle, so they wouldn't rot out. We made everything appropriate to the width of the Jeep. We went ahead and made a robust, longer control arm. I remember when the JKs came out, TJ owners were like, they're a long arm from the factory.
Yes. And then there was a constant spat on the forums of, do we call it a mid arm? Do
Yeah.
we call it a long arm? Do we call it a
Medium
short arm? Right? Absolutely. There was a constant, going
Yeah.
around, and it was just simply longer than a TJ,
Yep.
but it is still technically a short arm.
Yes.
Right? So it's a weird one. And honestly, I don't care what you call it. It's just a stock length, right?
Yes.
That's what I call it. Stock length arm.
And something else they did learn from the WJ is on the TJ and the XJ and the ZJ, we had a ball joint on our track bar at the frame, and we had a bushing at the axle. The WJ, they're like, hey, maybe we should just make it double shear on both ends with bushings. And that was a good idea.
Double shear, just for folks who are understanding, suspension terminology, means that it's captured on two sides versus one side. So
Yes.
whereas a ball joint is just sticking up vertically with a kind of a singular point of pressure, now we're grabbing it on two sides, so the bolt goes through two ears of sorts.
Yep.
So it's just, again, it's like that double military wrap that I was talking about from the leaf spring previously.
Yep.
It's a little bit of redundancy, it's a little more robust, it's a little less wear and tear.
Yep. And so they went ahead and instituted that.
It's also
end,
better travel suspension, as far as
Yes.
articulation and movement.
much gooder.
Much gooder.
And they did on both ends. And they decided that the Iron Y was not a good move and went ahead and back to a traditional 4-link control or 4 control arms and a track bar in the rear.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's pretty much where we got to stop.
It was I mean,
It is.
I think it's just say it was a little wider. It had better displacement. The ride quality is going to be all that much better. And so they beef it up. JTs are the only place that get a little goofy.
Well, we'll talk about all that next week.
Okay.
We'll have to continue it
Okay. We can
against
do
my
that.
will.
He tried.
Interesting.
No, because we need to talk about shocks. We didn't really talk about shocks. And I know how much you love talking
Coilovers?
about
I
coilovers.
knew you wanted to talk about coilovers.
There's a,
I love coilovers.
there's a lot of options to talk about.
I love coilovers.
we haven't talked about any aftermarket suspension pretty much.
Yep.
And and you know what I love about coilovers is I really I can really nerd out on the multi rates. Honestly,
So that's what you
we
have
didn't
to
even
tune
talk
into
about.
next week.
We didn't even talk about linear versus progressive spring rates.
Maybe
dual
what
rates,
we'll do is for our patrons, we'll just
Triple
put a
rates,
microphone.
right?
triple rates.
We'll just put a microphone in front of you and just let you talk for 2 hours, and we'll upload that to Patreon.
Oh my gosh, I get so giddy on suspension. If there's anything like besides U joint technology,
Yeah, he is excited about that.
I get excited over U joints.
Second
and
thought, that's
suspension.
not a good idea, because if I just let you ramble, nobody's going to want to
I
actually
was
pay
gonna
for
say
a
nobody
Patreon.
actually wants to.
Um,
Nobody actually wants to hear that stuff.
Daddy Jeep brought up nitrogen shocks. So yeah, we've got a
Nitrogen
lot.
versus hydro shocks. And nitrogen charge. Oh my gosh.
Air shocks.
We do air shocks. We could do the different valving. Why do we have? You know what? I
Oh, this
love
may be a
proportioning.
three-part episode. Oh.
I think the
He
big
said
challenge
he could
is.
talk a whole episode on shocks.
I was going to say,
know.
I think shocks have to be a separate episode. I cannot get off on a shock tangent because
That's true.
shock technology is
Yes.
really, yeah, it is
So
one
next,
that we
next
d-
week's just finishing out the suspension of the OEs, and then the aftermarket, and then after that is shocks.
Oh my gosh! Don't
Well,
even.
there'll be a
We
whole
promise we're gonna
shocking
take
episode.
a break. A shocking episode.
She loves it. I'm rolling my eyes. Your
Yeah.
sister.
Yeah, no doubt.
Yeah.
All right, folks.
So that's it. Yeah.
That's it. He said.
Go ahead. Do your outro.
Well, if you're still awake and you don't have zoned out, turn this off because we're just rambling about leafs and coils and bad puns. We thank you for hanging out with us, as we often do. If you want to hang out and hear what's going on in our personal lives, you're going to just kind of stay tuned for the next 25-30 seconds. Otherwise, check back in next week where we try and wrap this conversation up as succinctly as possible. And I promise I'll not go on to shock tangent as much as I'd like to.
Don't make promises you can't keep.
I will do my best. But we have a lot of Jeeps to work on, a lot of people to correspond with, and make that SFJ experience as different and as unique as possible. So until then, Jeep on.
Keep on.
Jeep on.
Did you do anything? Did either of you do anything?
So Saturday we didn't have kids, so we went to Erie, had a decent dinner, and got Amy work shoes. But then Sunday, we just stayed at home. I fired up the tractor and tractored most of the day, moving stuff around with the forks on the tractor.
It
And
was a beautiful day for that.
You didn't leave tracks all through your yard, or you just didn't care?
Maybe.
I was going to say.
I may have had to be like, what would Jeff do? Jeff would go get the bucket, take the forks back off after I've destroyed my yard, and take the bucket and then back drag over top of
exactly what I
everything
would
I
do.
just did. But I
Oh,
was
dear.
able to unload the car trailer and put a pile of scrap at my yard, because why not?
I thought that it was supposed to go to the scrap
It
yard.
was. I'm over it. Need to use the trailer.
His yard
Okay.
is a scrapyard now.
Right.
I was able to kind of neaten up that a little bit, so that was cool. I was able to move stuff around. I was able to procure wheels and tires for my wife's car and bring them into the shop and dismount them. Then I went ahead and loaded a front axle for a project that I had hoarded that we need for the M38 project.
Mm-hmm.
So I love the fact that now I don't have to roll tire at a time or try to get pep talks to kids to roll multiple things. I just went out there with the forks at the appropriate distance, put all the tires on the forks, opened the back of the Gladiator, went in there, went boop. I was like, this is what's up.
He's really enjoying his tractor.
It was awesome.
He's just
So
living his best life.
Just wait till summer when he can get more use out of it.
Right?
the yard just needs to firm up already.
Yeah, I was gonna say your yard's a little sloppy. For
Oh
that.
my goodness.
Yeah, we're
Yeah.
gonna have to put some drainage in
So
your yard.
much 4-wheel drive needed.
Yeah.
But
yeah.
at least I just had the tractor out back. I didn't have the Jeep out there really screwing it up. So, and then Amy did empower me to wash the tractor, so that was good.
Nice.
And then I've just otherwise been making the garage better. Made a little thing for my power hacksaw to sit on with casters. So A, it's more level, and B, I can now move it around the shop easier. I took the furniture dollies that were screwed to my metal brake off and put actual casters on it as well.
Mm.
And the brake has moved, the lathe has moved, and the drill press, bead roller, and the grinder have all moved in preparation for a new tool to come into the shop. So I'm excited about that, and that's also why I need the trailer. So
Yeah. That makes sense. That makes sense. I worked on the house, which obviously
good
I
weekend
love.
for it.
Yeah, it was a beautiful weekend for it. Honestly, we had the arts to support. On Saturday, we had a bunch of my kids were in some local community plays and stuff like that. So we're a pretty busy weekend with that in amongst normal life stuff. But realistically, the working on the house. Now the framers didn't do a great job setting the drywallers up for success.
No, they didn't.
I heard from the electrician that it was really interesting.
There are some challenges with the house
Yeah, yeah.
that I understand now better that I've done it. I think it's so fascinating. This is why we received some really kind words from Micah Bidwell, local president of a local Jeep club, right? Regional Jeep club. And those words were about how we as a business try to support DIYers.
Mm-hmm.
Because that's actually something really important to me. And while, yes, I firmly believe in our ability to provide services for even the most advanced individuals, realistically, we were all DIYers once. And
Yeah.
so we recognize that people are attracted to the Jeep world because of that idea that I can personally, turn a screw or a wrench or do something on the vehicle and kind of make it my own. Should I want to, right? And I think through that, and so Micah was saying like he appreciated because he came in to buy some parts, and not only did we have these good quality parts on the shelf, but we then kind of tried to help him see his DIY project through our eyes of sorts, right?
We're going to tell him about all the things that you need to do that we had learned the hard way,
Right.
so that he could just go home and do his project to completion, where we took us 3 weeks.
Well, and I think
we learned the hard way so that
and
we
I
can
think that
do better.
the whole nature of my house is like I really appreciate what goes into my house. How often, certainly as kids, you just wake up, your light switch is there, your faucet is there, it just kind of is what it is. You don't really have a great appreciation for how the house is constructed.
No, you may have a loose understanding, and you know that there's the boards that have to go up and make the walls.
100%.
But you don't realize the importance of where those boards are located.
Exactly.
How that plays against your electric, your plumbing.
And the best thing to do to learn is just to do it. Just rip the Band-Aid off and do it. But then you have to deal with either you burn it down later and start over and use all the things you've learned, or you just have to grin and bear it and just keep
Correct.
going.
You just have to grin and bear it and keep on going in some situations. Absolutely. And, I just think about the different iterations. And once you kind of rip that Band-Aid off and you can start building and changing and understanding how the function of it. And if you don't do it exactly right the first time, you understand that you're not exactly stuck, that there are workarounds. You might have to invest in a different product. Might have to wait for a different piece of hardware or a drill bit to make this job a little bit easier because you're drilling through 9 inches of king stud. But
with 2 inches of gap between the next studs, so you can't fit the drill in
yeah,
there.
I mean, little things. Not like we have any specifics to talk about, but
And then your drywall sheets don't line up with the studs at all, so you have to custom cut.
so maybe you're cutting a half an inch off a drywall,
Or maybe you're
you know,
cutting a half inch off the bottom of the drywall and an 1/8 inch off the top so that it lines up.
sounds crazy. I don't know. Those might happen. But you know, it was a beautiful weekend for it. My son was out there with me. The property's spectacular. Just kind of makes me so excited to do a big hard push this spring. So really valued that. And I miss updating our Patreons. And so I might have to get that going again. I think that the trudging for me kind of happened, and
Yeah.
with honestly a good bit thanks to Jeff for coming out and kind of helping me ignite that fire, and Jason as always for being a good supporter. And I have another guy who would like to learn some trade-esque stuff, and he kind of posted out into the world, and I was like, dude, you can come hang out with me on a Sunday, like. And I didn't want to be like,
what not to do next.
yeah, I
time.
wanted to be like, I don't know what I'm doing. I'm not trying to teach you anything.
So
But,
what I heard is we'll have to schedule it so I can come out too and help a little bit more guidance.
I don't know. I mean,
Jeff the builder really likes building.
Jeff the builder is his innate calling. That really is. There is something there. He's got the right balancing act of get her done and professionalism.
Mm-hmm.
You know.
Well, my weekend was honestly prepping to do more building. So I'm building to do more building.
You're in your garage specifically.
I'm
right?
working in the garage, and
because you got that smoking deal on the pellet stove.
Yep. So I've been slowly working through trying to insulate, things that I should have insulated before I put everything where it's at.
No.
So working around that, and then I'm building a double saw stand that is going to have a place for my table saw, and then also off the other side of it will be a flip table for my miter saw, so it can be at a working height, or I can flip it under the table and I have work surface.
Nice.
So I'm building that. It's a 4x8 table that I'm working through, so that I can build Davey's custom desk for here at the shop.
Which we're very excited about.
And he's got all this beautiful red oak sitting in a garage, wasting away, and it's 5/4 red oak, so it's nice thick cut, needs to be milled down. I need workspace to be able to do that, so that's where I'm like, you know what, let's just do it right and have a full workstation going. So
Right.
I got to once I get this table done, I told Davey I'd start getting the wood from his house and start working on that. Got to get my neighbor borrowed my planer, so I got to get that back from him, do a little bit of cleanup and maintenance on that, and be off to the races.
Yeah, I'm very excited to see how that turns out, because if you're not familiar, we've done a lot of infrastructure improvements within the confines of SFJ 4x4, move some personnel around to try and increase efficiency in our space utilization, and this custom desk will largely be for merchandise creation.
Yeah.
Is that correct? Right?
Yeah.
So we'll be moving some of our components around, and one of the things that's selling like absolute hot cakes right now is our Kindness. It's a Jeep thing. Give a Duck shirt. It's
I'm surprised how well that's been doing.
dude,
I mean,
it's been
taken
selling
off.
like crazy. It's in a promo price for just under $25, folks. You want to head over to our website and find that.
I think it's
get
a
part
limited
of that
run
movement.
too. I think Davey said there's only 100 of them.
Right, it is a limited run, and it has sold like crazy. We're not at the cap yet, so there's still time to order, and we encourage you to do so. It will be an absolutely awesome shirt to rep this summer, but you'll be among the first edition Kindness. It's a Jeep thing. Give a Duck. I think until next